you so much. Hello, everyone. As was mentioned, my name is Štěpán Rešl, but please call me Steve. I think it will be much more easier. As you can hear, I'm not from the UK. I'm from middle of the Europe, from the Czech Republic, so that's also why I have such a strange letters in my name. And anytime, if you would have any question, just don't hesitate and ask me. You can ask me meanwhile the session or after. I don't really care. I'm co-founder of a company called Data Brothers, which is a smaller company from the Czech Republic. We have clients all around the world. And I'm Microsoft's most valuable professional for data platform currently for 6 years already. Also, I have a blog post in English, which is called Data Meerkat. I have few ones also in a Czech, but they are not mentioned there for a purpose. If you would like to stay in touch, here you can find QR codes. I can show you them even on the end. But for today, I would like to talk with you about orchestration in case of Microsoft Fabric. And not just in case of Fabric, because we know Power BI is part of it. So if you work with a Power BI, you work with a Fabric. That's it. That's a simple answer. If I would ask who's working with a Fabric, and only a few people will raise their hands, no, they're lying. Everyone is, if you're working with Power BI. And to that, I have quite a short agenda for today, which first is why you should care about the orchestration for the first place, then the schedulers, some options that we have through Power Automate and the API, which is quite often this can be the savior for us. Then the pipeline, and then orchestration of the notebooks. Maybe just a quick question. Who's here from a data engineering perspective and works with Python notebooks and PySparks? Nice. Almost around the half. I like that. So the last part is for you. And if you work with them, I think you would know most of it. But let's see. Okay, let's start with why we should even care about the orchestration. And I think the answer for that is actually quite simple, because we have to. We don't want to deliver our end users or even just another team that are dependable on our data to receive the data that are old. Which is actually quite interesting that, yeah, we know that we should be doing this, and then we're using some part of the technology like a Synapse link or for Dataverse or for another parts of Azure that are actually not reliable in case of serving you fresh data. So even for that, quite often we need to create our own pushers of the data to the Fabric to really have as fresh data as possible. But okay, let's start from complete beginning, because if I would like to be talking about the orchestration, I need to talk about two particular words: coordination and dependencies. Because yeah, if we will not be looking on the dependencies, we never know which part of our ETL process should be running when, and if we should wait for some kind of item to finish before we will start something else. In case of coordination, that's just the process of it, how to grab all these particle activities and combine them together to actually work in case of harmonized process. Oh, come on. Yep. I will be also sharing the slides, so that's why you can see a little bit more of information on the slides, just for you to be able to return to it. Also, there's like 59 slides, so I don't want to be reading them. I would like to more like share with you what's inside and what's the message on the background. First, if I will look on a Fabric, and really I'm talking about Fabric, not a Power BI right now, we know that we have multiple different activities. I can have a copy activity, data flow, notebook, stored procedures, and much more. I just choose these 4 because it will be a little bit quicker. And let's say that initially I will start some kind of OP activity that will run for some certain time. I will do the same for data flows, notebooks, and for stored procedures. It's fine that they are running in parallel, sort of, if they are not dependable on each. Once there will be some kind of dependencies, like the data flow should be using the data that are just copied into our lake houses, I might be finding some issues. And wait a minute, I can somehow schedule the data flows for certain time point where it should be running, shouldn't I? Yeah, I can use its schedulers, but the schedulers are only for full hours and a half hours. And it's not running precisely on these minutes, we know. And I will be talking about that very soon. So we need to know how to actually take all these items, if we would like to use them, and harmonize them to be actually running in a certain way without larger gaps over time, and also with some kind of optimization of the whole running process. Like, we don't want to be running so much CU consumed items as I can see in many companies. Like in this chart, there's actually one item that I never use. Can you guess which? Data flow. You will never ever see a data flow in any solution that we would deploy. And there's a very simple answer. Why? Because it's extremely expensive. If I will just start to mesh up engine, it will already cost me 15 CUs. Wonderful. If I would like to spin up the PySpark, it will be 7. If I would, in the default settings, if I would like to spin up the Python notebook, it will be just 1. If I will be spinning up the copy activity, it will be 1. I will not be paying 15 CUs just for spinning up something that will mess up my data completely. And believe me, there are some certain ways how to start a mashup engine without starting the data flows itself, by few very interesting API calls in the background. Don't do that. Still, it's a mess. But let's say that we want, or we are a larger company or larger enterprise, and we would like to be running multiple ETLs, as we usually do. Then we really need to have in our mind what's the cost effective and what's not, and then focusing on that certain items. And also we need to have in our minds how many of these items can be run in parallel, in a global parallel way. For example, let's say that I have F2, F4 capacities. How many PySpark notebooks can be running in parallel? Just 1. You will not be able to spin up more than just 1 PySpark notebook in default settings. Why? Because it will already steal all your capacity. Just for that, you need to know that there are some certain of parallelism that is provided you by the capacity that you're actually using. In case of semantic models, data flows pipeline, Python notebooks, TSQ notebooks, it actually doesn't matter that much, because it not has some certain point where you can just stop. If you will try to run 100 semantic models there, or 100 refreshes of semantic models at once, usually Power BI service or a Fabric service will work somehow, but it will manage it, even if you spin all of them at one certain time. Same for the data flows. In case of the pipelines, first what it will do, it will actually look to the background log and find out if there's capacity that will be able to provide that for that pipeline. If it is here, it will be. So it just depends on how many CUs we have. In case of PySpark, Scala, R, HTML notebooks, by the way, yes, these are here. They are still hidden under the PySpark notebooks, but somehow they are here. Sometimes you can find out that there's also .NET notebook. just sometimes. It appeared like 3 times since Fabric was released. Every time Microsoft said it was just a mistake and it should never be inside, but 3 times it already appeared, so I don't believe them. In that case, it highly depends on your SKU, because in your SKU, you can find that you have some Spark vCores provided. And based on them, you can very easily find out how many parallel PySpark notebooks you will need. Because you will need at least, if I remember that correctly, 21 Spark vCores to be able to run, or not a 21, it's a 20. It's a 24, correct. 24 vCores to actually run native PySpark notebooks in a Fabric, which, if we can look in F4, or sorry, to F8, we can find, oh, we finally can be running 2 of them. Oh, nice. Still, it will be stealing so much capacity that it possibly will not end up that well. And if you will try to spin up a little bit more of these notebooks, like a little bit more PySpark notebooks at once, you will start seeing this beautiful message, 430. And I can see how some of you are just agreeing me. We know this error. And we know why. Because it's extremely common. By the way, there is very interesting issue in the whole Fabric. And that's pre-rendering your data in Lakehouse. Why the hell am I talking about pre-rendering your data in Lakehouse in case of orchestration, and especially in case of orchestration in cooperation with PySpark notebooks? It's because when in Lakehouse your data are pre-rendering for any user, it actually uses a PySpark, which means if there's some user that is opening the Lakehouse to preview a data, and you want to start doing something in your PySpark, you will possibly see the same error because you will not have enough resources to actually spin up your PySpark session. Same if you will be in a PySpark session and someone would like to see what's inside the Lakehouse, they possibly will receive an error message that, sorry, we cannot handle that. Nice. By the way, originally PySpark was not running this by the PySpark. Oh, sorry, Fabric was not running this by a PySpark, but by the .NET library. It was changed 1.5 years ago, unfortunately. No why, but okay, let's mess up with that. However, this highly belongs to on-demand triggers. If I will be in a notebook and I will click run, it's counted as an on-demand running. If it will be scheduled by a scheduler or by the pipeline, it will not be counted as an on-demand. And in that case, your run will queue into the queue limits. If it's on demand, it will directly fail inside the error. And as you can see in F2 and F4, you can queue up to 4 notebooks at once. And once one session ends, it will split another notebook, which is nice because at least you can have some notebooks in this queue. Yeah, what will happen if I will try to queue more notebooks inside? I will again receive an error. No more handler. Nice. Also, you can find out that currently in like past 2 months, even Python notebooks for their initial start requires at least 1 PySpark call be active for you to start a Python notebook. So sometimes even in Python notebooks, I can see same error. Still, Microsoft didn't give me the answer why the hell is happening, because they don't need it, the PySpark for that. It seems like they mess up something with the spin-up engine. Oh, well. Oh. Well, if I would like to have in a parallel the items itself, like I have one semantic model, which is called sales overview. And I would like to, for some reason, refresh it twice at once. Can I do that? No, I can't. If I will start the first refresh, it will start doing the whole refreshing process. If I will call it again for that refresh, I will receive an error that it's already in a queue or in processing, which is fine. So I can say that for semantic models, data flows, data stream, I can have one item in one instance. Same, by the way, for the pipeline. But I have here also the pipeline. One item per one active instance. Depends how I will do triggering of my pipeline. If it will be by the scheduler, so the native scheduler of the UI, I can have it just once. But if I will be triggering my pipeline once with a scheduler and once with an API, I will queue them. So in that case, I can queue as many pipelines as I want. Also, PySpark notebooks, they every time running just in one instance, but they are queuing themselves. So at the end, it can look like, I will get because every time when I trigger something, it will receive its own live ID. So it's more like duplication of the selves. And by this live ID, it's processed. Come on, I want a different slide. Okay, so it will be later. Oh yeah, I know where it will be. So we will get to that. Is there someone who's using high concurrency sessions for the PySpark? No one. Why am I not surprised? Microsoft announced that as solver for everything because you can be sharing your PySpark sessions between multiple PySpark notebooks. Oh, hell no. No. There's so many limitations that you need to follow to actually get into the high concurrency session. No way that I will be ever using that. First, the notebooks has to have same default lakehouse, and that's the initial issue. Usually, you want to load your data into multiple lakehouses, or for someone like me, I'm not using default lakehouses at all. I'm every time writing by the ABFS path, every time. Or okay, yeah. For a DAGDB, sometimes you need to use also mounted local path, but that's a different story. They need to have same Spark configuration. If between these two notebooks is just one difference in their Spark configuration, they will not be combined into same high concurrency session. And there's also a little bit of issue because Microsoft in their documentation is telling you that every time when you spin up your PySpark session, it will be automatically spin up with a default settings, with some bin side, with reorder turned on, etc., etc. Try to print these configurations out every single time. You will find out that their default settings mean that if we have a great day, we will spin up that session with these configurations. Mostly, we will not. So almost every single time, you need to have in your first cell that particular default configuration for your PySpark to be sure that it will be running as you expect. And by the way, they also need to use the same libraries, which means same pre-installed environment. If you're using multiple environments, then again, it will not be combined into high concurrency sessions. Nice. Also a bit of an issue. But okay, if someone has scenarios for that, lucky them. I don't. And by the way, in case of orchestration, you can find high concurrency, which defaultly for the pipelines is turned off, but the for notebook is turned on. So this is also not the best or brightest idea that Microsoft ever had, because quite often then it will happen that if it will find 2 or 3 notebooks that actually will be sharing that similar idea for lake houses, libraries, etc. It will combine them together, but under the session of the user who's triggered the first notebook. Which means that if you're using something like notebook utils.credentials.getSecret EDI, which means that you're actually using authentication token of a user who triggered that, it will be used in every single of that notebooks, not by another user that actually triggered the different notebook. Woo! Another useless integration. Sorry, I'm just honest. I've seen so many errors because of this, so I'm just sharing what I've seen. The scheduler. Something even worse. Nice. Okay. You recognize this one. That's a schedule for Power BI. Yeah. This particular scheduler gave us ability to run frequency daily, weekly, at certain time. Okay, 7 a.m. or 7:30, when it will actually be triggered. Anytime between 7 and 7:30. Oh my. So it's reliable? Definitely no. Sometimes it will be triggered at 7, sometimes at 7:05, sometimes at 7:29. Wonderful, and sometimes never. Does it happen ever for you that it actually never triggered the refresh? For me, it does. And for my client, unfortunately, also. And usually they don't understand what's happening. And also quite often the UI of Power BI service totally breaks in that case. Because in that case, you can see that in a workspace, you can see estimated next refresh time. If it will skip that refresh, it will still stay locked on that previous time. So then my clients were calling me, hey, there should be a refresh of our semantic models today at 7 a.m. Yeah, sure. But now it's 10:30. And I still can see it, it will refresh today at 7 a.m. Yeah, wait for tomorrow, it will change. But for them, the UI is absolutely disaster because they don't know. Nice. By the way, we know that for data flow, it's even worse. But yeah, it's the same. It works in completely same way, which means that if I have refresh for 9, it will refresh somewhere between. And it can go even to a next data frame or time frame. If I will have multiple of these refreshes, this is quite optimistic scenario how it might work. Let's say one refresh will be at 9, one at 9:30, one at 10, one at 10:30. I don't like these type of refreshes, but this is just for the demonstration of it. What will happen if one of them will actually be much longer than expected? Like here, it should be triggered somewhere between 10 and 10:30. Okay, yeah, it was somewhere in like 10:15, but the refresh itself was running so long that it went over 11, which means that particular refresh was skipped. And you will not find it out anywhere inside the UI, neither in API logs, by the way. This will just disappear completely. Oh. But what if I will look on this particular schedule? How this one works? It will work similar because I can be setting any minute. I can say, okay, it will run at 6 hours, 57 minutes, and it will be triggered at that certain time. Which means these schedules are completely different, and they are even telling you in when it will be triggered. By the way, again, it's not triggered at that minute, it's anywhere in that minute. So still they have like 60 seconds to trigger it, but they will. And if something will happen, it will not fail. it will just take another instance of that certain item with a new live ID and push it into the queue. Oh, come on. Yeah, like for now, I have here the scheduler for the notebook where I have a time and sleep for 2 minutes. And I'm saying, hey, let's trigger it. Sorry, then I've changed it to trigger it every 1 minute to be able to see that. And this happened. Here's the one that's currently running, and two are already waiting because they were still not started, so they are sleeping and waiting for their chance to shine. So luckily, we know that we have some schedulers that work as we would expect. Nice. What if we don't have access, for example, for the fabric? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Microsoft is trying to execute your refreshes in the time frame as soon as possible, but only if that capacity where it's running has capacity for that. It get better, especially last year, because is there someone who's actually downloading their activity events logs every single day? Nice. So in that case, you two were able to see in last November and December that in your tenant appeared almost like 200 or 300 new capacities that you were never able to find by API call for the capacities. It was Microsoft migration process where they were moving every customer from shared capacities to company closed personal capacities called Pro. So nothing like shared capacities exist anymore. Every customer has its own private capacity, even if they are running on a Pro or free. And since that, this gets much better because you're not sharing your capacity with like 100 another companies. For some clients, much worse because these capacities are much lower than they were. But that's still an option. So yeah. Okay. Let's say that we don't have a fabric or we cannot use refreshing through the Python notebooks or the pipelines, and we still need to stuck inside the Power BI or Power Platform world. What we can do? First, we can use our friendly Power Automate. Oh my. In the Power Automate, we also have a schedulers. By the way, they work absolutely the same as the schedulers for the Power BI semantic model. Because unless you're actually paying the highest license for the Power Automate, you're just believing Power Automate that it will do what you ask. And it's not that reliable as it should. For me, usually, hey, let's just spin up logic apps. It will be 100% reliable. Okay, 99.9999 as Microsoft declare. In Power Automate, it's like 50%, something like that. Unless I'm paying the highest license. Nice. No. So I still can have here some kind of trigger that it will be running my flow every single hour, for example. And I already have here the action for refresh a semantic model, which is wonderful. I can just choose my workspace, my semantic model or dataset still, and just by 2 steps, I have my own schedule that will be much more reliable than the Power BI ones. Interesting. But okay, somehow it's still more reliable. Same here is for the data flow. Absolutely the same. I can just choose workspace and the data flow itself, and it will refresh. By the way, this is not working for data flow Gen 2. This is only for Gen 1. That need to be mentioned. I don't want to use pre-created items, and I want to call it by myself. Why would I like to do that? First reason. This API gave you ability to refresh just a certain partition of a semantic model. You don't need to be refreshing the whole report, or you can just refresh one table. You don't need to be refreshing everything. Also, there are actually two endpoints for refreshing Power BI semantic models. One of them has limit to refresh your model up to 8 times or 48 times per day, depends on your license. And second one almost have no limits, which is even better. But no one is talking about them that much. Same is for data flows. By the way, there are also the calls for the Fabric ones. You can be triggering a refresh of your Python or PySpark notebooks or the pipelines. There's little issue with that. Not every single Fabric item supports refreshes with service principal authentication, which is the key. By the way, notebooks are, which is great. We can be triggering notebooks, and same for the pipelines. So luckily, we can do almost everything then. You mean like for the rest of the items? Microsoft don't know. I was screaming on them for the pipelines for like, okay, in that times it was the product was not called the Fabric. It's not that long ago when this finally appeared. There were some certain ways how to do that, like by triggers on the storage accounts, etc. So there were ways. This is a little bit easier because thanks to that you can create. Oh, yeah, this is for the semantic models. Let's keep that. Yeah. Here, by the way, you can see that you can be calling for this or it will be timeout, etc. Because you can, by the way, set up much larger or shorter timeouts for these calls. I have lots of clients that they are not using schedulers at all. All their refreshes are triggered by their databases. So once the database is fully loaded and everything is ready, it triggers refresh of semantic models. Everything nice and clean. And then they also can response, save it into the audit log inside the database, and they're fine. You can create very easy how automate with just 3 steps. And with that, you can be refreshing anything, almost anything, in your semantic model, in your Fabric. Even the notebooks, even the pipelines, semantic models, it doesn't matter. If you want to make it really easy for you, you can even help yourself because as you can see in a body, you're posting some kind of JSON, which can be by Power Automate first taken, for example, from some SQL database, so it can be fully meta-driven very easily. If you're not familiar with that, like with how Power Automate works, it's very easy to find it out. Also, if you would like to take the data from some SQL servers, Power Automate has its own Power Query inside to just grab a data from a SQL server and just reuse them, which is also quite nice. Come on, yeah. Here you can see the execute Fabric notebook and something that changed like 2 months ago. This is finally yes, not a no anymore. So currently we have support for these service principles for refreshing the notebooks. Luckily, that's all what I needed. And yeah, the pipeline. Who's working with the pipelines or with Azure Data Factory? Wonderful. So you will be familiar with this. But still, there's almost like half people that they didn't raise their hands. So I need to go through even the basics. Let's imagine the pipeline similar as a data flow. You have some kind of items that are executed in a certain order or in certain scenarios. And initially, the data pipeline was created as just orchestration structure, orchestration component, and it was running inside the Azure Data Factory. Okay, we know, inside the Azure Data Factory, you're not just orchestrating some stuff, because you also have some kind of copy activity, which is just wrap Azure Data Movement Services. It's still here. It's very nice, easy job that will just take your data from place A, do some transformations, and load it to the point B. Nothing else, which is nice and actually pretty fast. Besides that, it's just orchestrating another services. So it's doing nothing, just saying, hey, you will be running now, you then, you then, you then. That's it. We're ending here. Thanks to these activities, it has abilities to manipulate with multiple sources and even behave slightly differently in Fabric than it was in a Synapse or it was inside the Azure Data Factory. For example, like triggering the Teams and sending the messages. Which is extremely handy because if something fails, you want to push to your users that, hey, there's something that failed and your data are not reliable right now. We have 3 different types of activities. Data movement ones, which is actually just one activity. That's the copy one. Transformation activity, which means we are triggering different services, data flows, notebooks, Azure Batch, functions, etc. And as I said, doesn't trigger any control flows, which means I'm doing something until, I'm doing it if, I'm creating variables, etc. It's everything that's hidden under these items that needs to be used to control the whole process. But still, it would not be enough, because between all the items, we need to have also our consequences. We need to know when some certain item should be running and what happened if. So we have 4 different options from every single item. Sorry. Oh, not this one. Sorry. I just can see how. Okay, now it might be a bit better. Okay. If the data will be copied correctly, so no error will be raised, we will set our variable to something. If it will not, we will trigger another part of a pipeline, and every item mean new start. So what I'm seeing quite often when people are starting with the pipelines, they're expecting that, okay, if this was a fail, all the rest needs to be also in a fail pipeline, fail line. No, every time it's a new start. So if this one will be set up completely, it will trigger this one and then this one. So we know that we have on success something which is called on fail. I'm on failure. We also have on run, which means it doesn't matter if it will success or fail. Still, it will trigger what should be going after. By the way, yes, one pipeline can be triggering another pipelines, which gave us the possibility to extend our whole process, also to have a little bit more complexity inside, because data pipeline doesn't give you ability to do until inside until and lots of these structures. And next to, oh, come on. On the end, as I mentioned, just triggering for the teams, which can be sent to certain group of the people, or it can be sent to certain channel. Both of these types highly help to find out if something is happening, but it's sending every time under your account or under the account that set up that particular flow. There's also quite easy option inside that can be by a function called create array. And by activity status, you will receive every time the status of certain activity. So you can be literally just getting, okay, this was success, this was not, this was skipped, etc. And you can just receive all these statuses. And if some item has a specific output activity or specific output status, you can also retrieve them. For example, like a notebook tab. You know that you can close your notebook, but notebook by notebook utils.notebook.exit. And inside that, you can push anything that you want. If you will do that, it will be propagated as the end message of certain activity, and it can be extracted and also pushed to your users. We're using that for monitoring whole our process of transforming our data. From every single notebook, we're just receiving the output results, if it's okay, or if there was some certain error, if there were how many rows were written, etc. And we're combining together and pushing it to our admins to know that if everything was correct and they can sleep, or if they need to be running to their computers and fix it. Like for now, it will be look like this. For example, the bronze failed, silver failed, gold failed. You definitely need to start your run to your PC and fix it. It was a competition. And there's also one very nice one, which is called onSkip. Because onSkip gives you possibility to trigger something if something before was not triggered. Which means, like, if we were, come on, in this particular scenario, and the copy activity would fail, it would mean that this variable will not be triggered. So it will be skipped. In that case, from this variable, I can create a new item and combine it with onSkip, and that one will be activated only if this trigger will not be running. I can have like multiple starts in my pipeline. Every time it will be starting on the absolute beginning, but in the meantime, it can be multiply started again. And as I mentioned, inside the pipeline, we can trigger almost anything, luckily. Because to be honest, pipelines are one of the most reliable items inside the fabric. Really. It's sad, but it's true. For example, who thinks that the lake house are reliable? Oh, nice. Who thinks that the warehouses are reliable? Okay, who thinks that the fabric is reliable? Oh, well. That was a hard. I didn't expect that. But you have a right. Okay. Yeah, for almost every single item, we can select when it will time out, how many retries it will be trying to do. So if it will fail, meanwhile, let's try it again, and let's find out if it will work. And there's also options, secure output, secure input. Who's using them? Only few of us. Okay. That means that in a log, no one will be able to see what is coming into this activity and what's the output. Why would you ever need to do such a thing? For example, if I would be taking some, how to call it in English? Some data that no one else should see. For example, like a data, yeah, for example, or the data from Azure Key Vault, for example. Because that brings me to one pain point of the whole fabric. Have you ever tried to receive data from your Azure Key Vault that is accessible only from the private IP or from a certain VNet gateway, and then use this particular data from the Key Vault in, for example, like notebooks. If you've ever tried it, you will find out that notebooks, it doesn't matter if it's a TSQL, Python, or PySpark, every time runs under the completely different IP address. And there's no range for them. So you would literally need to open that Azure Key Vault for every single IP address in the world. So no. So in that case, quite often, you're clicking on these and you're hoping that the behavior that you've created inside will not be seen by anyone from the security. That they will definitely ban Fabric. Really hope that one day Microsoft will address this issue. Still, it doesn't seem like that, but okay. Orchestration of the notebooks. Yay! The most interesting part of it all. There are multiple ways how to do that. First, you can be just triggering one by one notebook in the pipeline. Oh, please don't do that. Please never ever do that. Why no? Because if it will be the PySpark notebook, every single time you need to spin up the session and then turn it off. When it's turning off, it's cleaning after themselves. So it can take quite a lot of time, and actually it takes quite a lot of resources. So even just triggering like 5 notebooks can take quite large amount of your capacity, even if they are very fast ones. In that case, you should be searching for better ways how to do it. So let's say that we will be triggering just one notebook, and we need to find a way how this one notebook will trigger another notebooks, for example, somehow. First option that we have from Microsoft is called run. That's also not the best way how to do it. Why? Because it's not work. It doesn't work like that. It will actually run different notebook. No, it will open that notebook, take its code, and bring it to its own code in that particular cell where it will be executed. Which means that if you're using in your notebook some variables, and in that notebook you're using them also, you will be overwriting them. That's a huge mess. Also, there are some dependency levels. And if you have one notebook that has a run, second one also have a run, and you're just bringing them together, it will be absolutely unmanageable. And also Fabric will fail if you will have more than 5 nodes, please. Yes. Yeah. It's inside the documentation, and also it's in a book that we've wrote with Johnny, with inside the reference guide for DP600. Sorry, I forgot to mention it on the beginning. Yeah. Okay. Then we have 2 more options, much better ones. Notebook-utils.run, notebook-utils.notebook.run, and run multiple. My beloved one. The first one works completely differently than a run. It will actually just trigger the notebook in your session. So first, how you trigger your initial notebook, it will create your own session, and under that session, it will be triggering another notebook in somehow protected way. So it will not be overwriting its own variables. It will not be sharing same libraries. It will just be triggering run of different notebooks. By the way, they don't need to share same lake houses, same libraries, same Spark properties. It will just be run. It's much better. But still, I would need to be triggering one by one. And to be honest, not every time running everything in a sequential way is the best way. Quite often you want to use some sort of parallelism. And for that, we have a run multiple. As I said, my beloved one, because it gives you absolute control of what you're doing when you're doing that. how long certain parts inside the notebooks should be running, etc. And you can be triggering even notebooks in a different workspaces, which is even better. So for the notebook utils.notebook.run multiple, we need to find what's a DAG. Who knows what's a DAG? DAG. Just a few one. Cool. By the way, it's just a shortcut for Directed Acyclic Graph. Oh, come on. Nope. We need this. This is one way how to look on Directed Acyclic Graph. You have some certain start, some certain end. You can have multiple ends, by the way. But what's key inside of it is that every single node will be running just once. You're not able to create loop inside that graph. Every time it has to, every node needs to be running literally just once. So in this case, I would be triggering first notebook that will be triggering second one. Also, it's triggering a stop, which is fine because this one will be waiting till all the four will be finished. That's something what that function will maintain for you. This is a little bit more complex of the same. And as you can see, in this case, from start, I'm triggering 3 branches. One that directly ends here, and it's not continuing anywhere. Because as I said, I can have multiple ends. But then I have branch 1, branch 2, and from them, multiple branches. And it will work completely fine. I will just need to somehow declare this. And it's actually not hard how to do it, because it's just a JSON definition of how it should behave. In the earlier state of a JSON, you declare activities, which will mean certain notebooks, how they will be running, and timeout in session in seconds for that whole run of a session, and concurrency. How many of notebooks in parallel can be running? If there will be, for example, like 2, and I will have 50 notebooks that can be run in a parallel by the definition inside, it will still be running just 2, and by that window of 2, it will be moving. So it will actually maintain this order for me every single time, which is great. But inside the activities, I'm every time defining what will be running. So name of a notebook, then the path. Path is quite crucial since Microsoft deployed the folders. Because if you will have, for example, like notebook 1 in a folder which is called sales, it will be sales/notebook name. But in that case, you can really define in which folder the certain notebook is stored. Timeout per cell, by the way, natively is 90 seconds, which can be pretty low for some certain operations. So where you can change it. There's arcs, which gives you ability to pass the parameters for that particular notebooks. So if you have a cell, set it up as a parameter cell, this argument will be passing the parameters into that cell. In the workspace, it doesn't have to be fulfilled. If you will not inside, it will be just searching in the local one where the session was started. If you will use it, it will then every time point point to certain workspace where it will start going through the path to your notebook. You try how many times it should be trying to run your notebook and the dependencies. And that's the key point. Because for the dependencies, you can say here the notebook 1, and here's the dependency for notebook 1, which is telling that first it will be running notebook 1, and then when it's finished successfully, it will trigger this one. You can see I'm activity notebook 1 exit value, which means that if I will be using in notebook 1 notebook utils.notebook.exit and passing anything inside of that, it will be passed as a parameter to another notebook, which is absolutely wonderful. You can parameterize everything between them. But every single time in every single notebook, you need to import library that you need. It will not be shared. Variables will not be shared. If you want to have variables shared across the whole session, you have few ways how to do it. If it's a PySpark, you can use Spark config set, but I've never said that because it's not the best way how to do it. So it's better to passing by the arcs. Let's stick to that. But I've seen a lot, and I've seen people even passing in that arguments something like keyboard names and much more. Wonderful. Yeah, my security heart was crying when I've seen that. Like, no. But okay, let me get into your logs for a moment. I might steal something, almost like everything. And it will not care, there will be more and more, like in this case. And I have here, for example, like local server workspace scanner. And it's waiting to end of fulfilling multiple different notebooks. And it doesn't have to be from the first node. I don't need to be setting all previous nodes. I need to just define the last one for that certain notebook. So the data sources will be running after load to silver users and the groups. So I need to wait till both of these notebooks are completed, and then this will be triggered. And I'm not waiting if before them is triggered, for example, like load to silver app. Because in the dependencies, the function will create the chart itself, and then it will just deploy it by the simple definition. And yeah, in some cases, you can even see total time per cell in seconds, 7,200. Yay! That's a PySpark power. It's actually quite funny story because PySpark should be, by what Microsoft is saying, the fastest, more reliable, most reliable, etc., etc., etc. No. Is it expensive? Yes. Is it why they are using that? Yes. Let's say that in this case, for executing this notebook, which was running on 36,000 something parquet files at once, it was running almost like 2 hours. Because if you've ever seen how workspace scanner response look like, Power BI, API, workspace scanner, and especially if you're extracting whole the fabric for large enterprises, it's a mess. And especially if you would like to create every single data frame for every single type of item with every single parameter, that's wonderful. So it was running 2 hours. Can you guess how fast DAGDB this can do the same? 3 minutes, 12 seconds, 31 milliseconds. That's a huge difference what you can do. 2 hours or 3 minutes. In case of CUs, okay, 210 CUs versus almost like 15,000. Nice. That's the power of a PySpark. Luckily, yeah, this was before Microsoft gave us ability to use the Python notebooks. Since we have ability to use Python notebooks, everything is much easier because since that, I didn't touch a PySpark, to be honest. Also, in case of a notebook run multiple, you can turn on and off display deck via graph, which means that after the whole run, it will create something like this for you. It will gives you possibility to actually see when some certain notebook was running and the time from to. So you can literally find out if everything works as you expected. Oh, cool. One small issue, you are not able to trigger Python notebooks from a PySpark notebook. Same, you can't trigger Spark notebooks from a Python notebook. Every time Python notebooks need to be triggering Python notebooks and PySpark notebooks need to be triggering PySpark notebooks. If you will not do that, you will receive this wonderful issue error, which will go error 400. Child notebook compute type Jupyter compute does not match to main notebook compute type Spark compute. Nice. So that's something that it's great to have in our minds, that if you would like to be triggering PySpark and the notebooks, it needs to be split slightly. So you can have maybe one part of the PySpark, then the Python to finish it, and then another trigger of a gold, if we would need to. But still, you can use absolutely the same functions. Notebook utils.notebook.run multiple works for Python notebooks, even for PySpark notebooks. By the way, even for TSQ notebooks. Just saying. And that's all. Precisely 1 hour. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, I'm here.